Hi, welcome back to a RISE video. Again, RISE stands for Role-Playing, Imaginative, Suspenseful Entertainment. This is the tabletop RPG game system that I developed myself. And I want to share today a continuation on making a character. Again, one of the main aspects of RISE is the amount of options that you can have with character creation. Literally, I was trying to come up with a number and I just gave up after like a quintillion or something. There are so many permutations of characters you can make. In the last video, I went through the first few here on how to make a character all the way up to, I believe, number 2 on this list. So we're talking about the attributes and focuses and starting scores. Today, I want to talk about how to choose a race, rolling racial traits, what the races I've come up so far are, and then background and gaining some money to start with for your character, and then some stuff on gear. I'm going to go pretty quick through this video today. There's a lot of information for some of these. A lot of the racial information has to do with some of the world building concepts that I haven't really gotten into yet. So you'll see a lot of text on the screen for background information and stuff like that. You can choose to ignore that. I'm not going to read it off. We'll go way more in depth in a future video on all the different races individually, what they're all about, as well as the backgrounds and everything like that. But for now, I'll go at least on an intro to all of these things. So to start with, I'll show you the first few races. They are called Human, Halfling, Orion, Feral, Gargan, Vata, Starforged, and Infernal. These are just the base values for their starting HP or health, speed, their movement speed, how quick they are, and MP or magic points. So they're all going to be different here. Some of them have dashes. That's because it kind of varies significantly based off of what kind of character you pick. So for example, a halfling is a mixture between two other races with human. And a feral, you'll find out shortly. So again, to quickly go through the races, the first one is the human. Pretty generic. It is a human. And that's not too much else to say about that. Basically, if you choose to pick a human, you have these starting base stats. You get to add 1 to any attribute of your choice. And then you get to pick any one focus, as well as you gain an extra conviction point when you level up. I haven't really gone too in-depth on conviction points yet. I'll go in further depth on that later. You speak a common language, and you get to roll twice on this table here. So you roll 2 dice or 2 d6 dice, 6-sided die, and you end up with whatever results you get here. If you roll the same result twice, you'll just re-roll that. The next one, like I said earlier, is the halfling. And just for ease of how to make these characters. So far, the halfling just consists of any mixed race with a human and some other race. Currently, in the world building I've come up with, only the humans are able to interbreed with all the other races. So you end up with a half human, half something else. And basically, your stats, you take an average of the stats of a human and another race, as well as you get to add 1 to charisma. You gain an empathy focus. You speak the language of common and the other race tongue, and then you roll once on the halfling table and once on on each of the other parent races. So you actually get to roll a total of 3 times for a halfling. The next race I've come up with, I'm calling the Orions. Oops, scrolled down a little too far there. So the Orion is basically a mixture between a dwarf and a traditional halfling or a hobbit type creature in most other games. So the Orions are, like I said, a mixture of dwarfs and halflings that you might be familiar with. They're kind of your crafty type making things people, very tech savvy. Here's their starting stats. They get dexterity bonus, and then of course, like I said earlier, they get to roll on this table. Something that's unique to them is that the Orions start out with, if they want, some kind of cybernetic augmented body part if they so choose. As we go through these, I'll start to go faster once we kind of get the feel for it. The next up is feral folk. These are sort of your humanoid, animalistic type race. There's a lot of different options for this, so the starting abilities and attributes and stats for these are just going to vary wildly depending on what kind of animal you have. Like an ape and a cat are going to have very different starting attributes than 2 types of humans, for example. So there's lots of different features over here. There's a whole table in fact, for it. So if you start out with an ape, of course, you have opposable feet and you get climbing. Let's say you choose to start out with the lizard instead, you get night vision, and you can regenerate some of your health during combat. The next race we've got here is a Gargan. These are very similar to the Goliath race in D&D. These are your really bulky, strong, tall warrior types. However, you don't have to play it that way if you so choose. They've had their starting stats here, and then again, this 2d6 roll table there. The next one is the Vata. These are your elvish type race, and they have very kind of muted colors and tones, very like lights and darks here without many colors. But essentially, they're like your elf ancient race, live a long time, intelligent and dexterous. Next up, we have the Starforged, and these are, in fact, based on the Warforged of D&D as well. Robots, essentially, sentient living robots. We'll go in a lot of depth on this in the future, but just to get through all these races for now. And then the last one is called the Infernals. So these are like I'm kind of forgetting the name of them. Tieflings, I believe is how it's pronounced in D&D. Infernals basically often are persecuted against because of the way they look, but are very strong in magic, and they're also powerful in some of the melee and ranged effects as well. So next we're going to take a look at the backgrounds, and then we'll look at gear. So I'm not going to go through all of the backgrounds here, just a few of them. Basically, for each background, it's sort of like what your character did, or maybe their occupation, or how they were making money or living before you started playing as maybe an adventurer of some sort. So I have everything here. They're all alphabetized, so acolytes down to a cook, a blacksmith, bartenders, artisans, and athletes. Essentially, each of these has an amount of starting credits. On average, I think I made the starting credits about 100. Slightly more, slightly less. Yes, some of these in real life would have a lot more or a lot less money than that, but to keep it pretty even, they're all slightly around the 100 mark. They all get a +1 focus, so something they're slightly better at than other characters. And then they start with a stunt, or if they roll doubles while they're doing something, if they roll 2 of a kind on any dice, there's an occasion where they might be able to use this ability. So for example, the acolyte, if they get 2 doubles points here, their faith has impressed their constellation or some god-like deity, and so they gain a divine inspiration, giving them +1 on their next ability test. So just some things to make each of the characters more unique in their background. So next up, we'll take a look at how you can actually use these starting credits to make a character. So just like with everything else, I'm going to go very, very quickly through these. I'm not going to go over every piece of starting gear. Most of these are weapons and armor. There'll be a whole nother video for all of this stuff. But essentially, you'll take a look at this table here. Each of these items has a base cost. So let's say you want to pick up a short sword. That'll cost you 20 of your starting credits. And then you have information here on the base physical damage it does, a weight effect where I'll go again in the weight and strength and how all that works later, and then the range of the weapon itself. If you scroll over a little bit, you'll be able to see that there is armor types and different types of armor to purchase. So, if you want to have hide armor, then that'll also cost you another 30 credits, bringing you down from your total over there. If we've already spent 50 credits on a short sword and hide armor. So depending on, what you want to actually be able to get, it's going to cost more money. So that's mostly it for today. We're going to go through a lot more stuff in the future, going back to look at where we want to go with this. I have the goal to talk about in the next video this whole class tree. That's a huge aspect of Rise that makes it very unique. Every time you level up, you get points to allocate to however you want, and almost a limitless number of ways. So that'll be the next video, and then we'll finish this kind of creating a character series with our last video on these last 4 here, coming up with a name and an archetype, relationships, and maybe even a picture there. So that's what's coming up, and then in the future I'll actually start making characters, showing off, creating, and coming up with some examples of how you can make awesome Rise characters and all the different ways that they can be created. Again, if you're interested in this, please subscribe. If you click the subscribe button, then you can keep seeing more of this. It'll show up in your sub feed. Like the video if you did like it. It helps. It makes other people see it. And then leave a comment. If there's stuff you're interested in, want to see more about, if you tell me, I'll be more likely to make a video of that sooner rather than later. But the goal is to make a video about everything in the Rise system. So again, thanks so much for watching. My name's Alex, and this is Rise.